Africa, and welcome for yet another episode of the Procmura podcast. I am your host, Sam Aboya, and as usual, we are coming to you from the Procmura Media Center here in Nairobi, Kenya. Today, we want to focus our discussion in Nigeria, and we're going to have a conversation around the relationship between the freedom of religion or belief and human rights, and as well as we look at the way forward or the way to go. And to help us in that discussion, we have a panel of great people who are joining us virtually all the way from Nigeria, starting with Dr. Dambok. We also have Dr. Yakubu, and we have Dr. Hamza. And because probably they are speaking to our audience for the first time, I will allow them to introduce themselves, to tell us a little bit about themselves, where we can find them in Nigeria, and what they do. And allow me to start with Dr. Yakubu. If you can hear me, you can just introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers across Africa and beyond.
Thank you very much for having us. My name is Yakubu Joseph. I am the Continental Coordinator for Procmura Forb project in Africa. I work for Mission 21 as the country director for Nigeria, and I am located in Nigeria, where I work with the other two panelists, also as part of the Nigeria Forb network. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yakubu. Dr. Dambok, you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Longji Dambok. I am the project coordinator of Fulani Headers Farmers Reconciliatory movement called the Modibo Project here in Nigeria. And I'm also a clergy with the Church of Christ in Nations. And I reside in the capital city of Nigeria, Abuja. Thank you.
Now, getting into the conversation, I think allow me to bring in Dr. Yakubu. And in your introduction, you mentioned that you're the continental coordinator for Forb. And I don't think there is any other better person to ask this other than you. Can you kindly help us understand the current situation in terms of the freedom of religion or belief across the continent?
With regards to the state of freedom of religion or belief across Africa, I think there is a little to celebrate. First, we begin that all African countries are signatories to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which basically re-echoes the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 18, has provided vividly for the protection of freedom of religion or belief. And in Article 8 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, that freedom is also upheld. We have seen that states have also taken steps to domesticate this provision. However, because there are two types of violations, one is driven by the state, the other is driven by non-state actors. So we have restrictions imposed by states. To an extent, we can say this is not too much a problem, except in few contexts. But we have seen increasingly society, communities taking law into their hands, where people try to trample on the freedom of religion or belief of others. This has increased either because of trumped up allegations of blasphemy or denying others the right to practice their religions, or conscripting people and drafting them into their own religion, as we have seen across the Sahel, we have seen in the Horn of Africa, where religious extremists are abducting people and forcing them to practice a religion that they do not belong to. So I would say that while some progress has been made across the continent, we still have we have seen the hand of the clock turn backward with regards to social hostilities across the continent.
Thank you for that, Dr. Yakubu, and we really appreciate that overview as far as the Forb situation is concerned across the continent. And now, allow me to bring in Dr. Hamza, if you can hear me. You mentioned something again as well in your introduction, that you're working with the social protection programs. And I'm just wondering if you can help us understand some of these emerging issues that are affecting both the women and the youth with regards to Forb violations in Nigeria, because again you mentioned that you're working with the vulnerable groups, including women and the youth. What are some of these emerging issues that are affecting the Forb?
Yes.
Yeah, we can go ahead.
Yes.
It's okay.
The main emerging issues that we observed while working with this group, the women, the youths, and the children, we notice that the effect of poverty because of economic activities that are not too friendly, especially with the rural women. And so the effect of the poverty has made them to be devastated in the terms of their children not attending school. They can't have access to basic health facilities. They don't have a nourished meal. But with the intervention of the social protection program, things began to change. And testimonies that we have found from the women is that they can now eat a decent meal. They can now send their children to school. They can access basic health facilities when they are unwell. But the intervention does not cover everybody. So the percentage that are yet to be covered are still facing the challenges of lack of access to basic social facilities. And in some instances, the youth become so discouraged and become depressed to the extent that we have found some of them engaging in drug abuse. And so it became necessary for counseling, partnering with other organizations to provide some kind of psychosocial support to them so that we can see if there are other options, not for them to wait for government intervention. And if you look at the other aspect of young children, a lot of children are out of school in Nigeria generally, and particularly in North Central. They're out of school for several reasons, but main of the reason is because of parental influence. Influence in the sense that the parents have not been able to meet up their obligations, and the number of children are many, so they cannot cater for them. And so they remain out of school. But again, interventions that are being brought have been able to tackle a lot of program. Yes, it has been able to tackle most of the challenges. And but again, the population is too large for government alone to tackle the situation. So
okay,
we are gradually moving and engaging with other civil society organizations, international partners, to see how we can improve the situation. So these are just the kind of experiences we have in the field.
I want to bring in Dr. Dambok, and I would ask if you can help us understand the relationship between FOB, that is the freedom of religion or belief, and human rights, the interlinks, the relationship. Speak to us about that kindly.
All right, thank you. Taking leave from what Dr. Yakubu said, he actually gave us a very wonderful foundation to build our discussion on. Now, talking about the relationship between the FOB and human rights, I want to say that they are intertwined. FOB is human right, and human right is FOB. You can't take one away from the other. And I think one of the reasons that brought about FOB to become an emphasis on its own is because the concept of human right as enshrined in Article 18 of UDHR is because we have not upheld the core emphasis of Article 18 in our various countries. As such, the emphasis of FOB. But I want to put it this way, that because Article 18 of Universal Declaration of Human Rights talks about freedom, the right to conscience, the right to thinking, and the right to religion. And that actually specifically has it that freedom of religion or belief is a universal human right, as it were. So the relationship between the two speaks so much about the universal acceptability of human rights as well as freedom of religion, such that the practice of one is as well the practice of the other. Wherever you see a people practicing freedom of religion or belief, you would have seen a people that are holding dear the dignity of human right in its entirety. So I want to say that the two concepts cannot be separated from one another. They are one and the same if you look at it very, very closely. And I want to also put it very, very clear, like I highlighted, that where you see a violation of human right in the context of Article 18, be sure to see the violation of freedom of belief, of religion or belief. There's no two ways about that. So that wherever one is upheld, the other is also being upheld. But where one is violated, automatically the other is being violated too. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come back to you, Dr. Dambok, but at this point, allow me to bring in Dr. Yakubu, because Dr. Dambok has mentioned something very important, that FOB is human right and actually human right is FOB. But listening to you at the introductory part, you mentioned that there still is a lot of room for work to be done across Africa in terms of promoting and protecting FOB. Now, help us understand, how does governments or policymakers ensure that this very basic human right, that is FOB, does not only remain in paper or does not remain in theory, but is practiced as well? It's practiced, protected, and promoted across the continent.
Yeah, so beyond codification, beyond enacting laws, enshrining this the provision of FOB in the Constitution, beyond uh, putting in place policies, legal frameworks for ensuring the protection of FOB, that steps must be taken by states to ensure that a culture of FOB is developed. So, what I mean here is that on one hand, you can have all these instruments that have provided the foundation, the legal framework for the protection of FOB, but you also at the same time need to have the people think FOB. You need to have the people develop a culture of respecting freedom of religion or belief. Because if there is a disjuncture between the legal provisions and the culture, where if the culture is intolerant of religious freedom or freedom of belief, if the culture is not able to embrace diversity, if the culture is not able to respect the rights of religious minorities, if people are not socialized to accept plurality of religion, if people are not socialized to accommodate people that believe in what they believe and people that don't believe in what they believe, then you'll have the statutes just merely there. And of course, you cannot turn in all the people into the prison. It's not possible. So, what we need to see happening is that there has to be a human right education will include FOB education. People should be educated to understand the fundamentals, the importance, and the need for freedom of religion or belief. And in every given contest, it is important to make the effort to ensure that the culture of freedom of religion or belief is developed. And this is one area I think that we see so much gap, that there is not about the lack of laws, there is not absence of legal provisions. But what is lacking is generally a culture of FOB. And I cannot overemphasize the need for this culture of FOB, because normatively, you can say that these laws are there, but these laws, how do they inspire people? Do people embrace these laws, internalize them, and practice them as part of their everyday interactions? And this is where I think other we will have to look at the role of parents. We have to look at the role of schools. We have to look at the role of religious institutions. We have to look at the role of opinion leaders. We have to look to these days with social media and the internet. We have a whole tribe of young people who rely on getting the information from the social media and the internet. And we have to also make sure that there is enough education about folk in that domain so that young people are exposed to the knowledge of folk so that they also can be socialized into it to develop that culture. So I think that is one area that I want to commend Procmura for initiating this project and to make sure that we work together, Muslims and Christians work together, and even leaders of other religions coming together to work on this aspect of building a culture of freedom of religion or belief. What is the culture of freedom of religion or belief? It is about developing the capacity for accommodating religious diversity among the people. It is about developing the capacity of accepting others who are different, who seek to believe differently, or who don't even share in what we believe. The culture of Forb is about developing the ability in people to accept the rights of others to coexist and to see the need that if we are a religious majority, we also should not use our numerical strength or control of political power to undermine religious minorities. And we also extend this protection to those who don't even believe, those who are even secular minded. They deserve protection because the freedom of religion includes also freedom of conscience. You can exercise your right not to believe, and that also must be protected. So we have got a lot of work to do in the area of building and sustaining a culture of thought. And this has responsibility for everyone. All actors have a part to play in building a culture of thought, from the school to the religious institutions to the homes to workplace. You have to respect also at the workplace. This is important. We also have to, in public space as well, we need to respect that. So I will just stop here, but I can assure you that there is so much work to be done. And I think Procmura is moving in the right direction in this regard.
Wow, it's really great listening to you, Dr. Yakubu. And talking of social media, I want to remind our viewers and listeners from across Africa and beyond that you can also contribute to this conversation and keep the conversation going through our social media platforms. On Facebook, we are at Procmura, that is the Program for Christian-Muslim Relations in Africa. On Twitter, we are at Procmura_Prica, and on YouTube, you also find us at Procmura Prica. You will allow me to bring in Dr. Dambok. And again, listening to you in the introductory part or your message, part of your message, you mentioned that you come from the Fulani, who are herders in Nigeria, and there is a conflict between herders and farmers in Nigeria, which has led to quite some violence that affects human rights. We cannot run away from that as well, that when conflicts happen, they affect in one way or the other the rights of people, including the right to freedom of religion. Would you speak to us about that, Dr. Dambo?
Yeah, thank you. If you look at Nigeria in particular, you would agree with me that one of the problems that we've had over the years, apart from the Boko Haram, is the bandits, the Fulani bandits, so to say, as well as the headers and farmers crisis that has engulfed majorly central Nigeria and then extended to parts of the east. And if I may say, the entire Nigeria. Now, I actually am a peace advocate, in that terrain. One of the things that we have discovered about the headers farmers conflict over the years is that there has been an encroachment of the Boko Haram, into the bandits cycle themselves, which actually complicate issues. So where it used to be just a pastoralist stroke farmers problem, now it has become a full-blown terrorist activities. And what that means is that there is a fanatical religious dimension that has been added to it. So imagine Boko Haram elements encroaching any organization. What that simply means is that terrorism has come to identify with that organization. So given the farmer headers crisis as we have been witnessing over the years, you could bear me witness that there is serious religious undertone to the effect that some of the Fulani headers who have taken up arms against the state as well as farmers, as a matter of fact, you could see there is some use of force and violence to convert people of other religion to accept a particular religion. Now, what that simply means is to tell you to a large extent the effect of the encroachment of Boko Haram element into the headers as we used to know them. So when that happened, Forb is already violated because time and time again we have seen some of those bandits chanting, some religious slogan in the course of attacking the vulnerable communities. We have seen them calling a particular religious slogan so many times when they come to attack some of these communities. So you could actually see that the freedom of religion or belief has been violated also by the farmer herders crisis. And what that actually, or rather what brought about that is the encroachment of Boko Haram, who of course we know are religious fundamentalists, into the herders camp. And of course, when that happens, you know that people that don't share the same religious ideologies with whoever it is that partners with Boko Haram will definitely be killed, be threatened, or be forced to change their religion. So you can now see that the intervention of Procmura via freedom of religion or belief can never be far from headless farmers crisis as we're having it in Nigeria right now because of the encroachment of Boko Haram elements among this community of people. And in fact, one of the things that get me to be interested about Procmura is the fact that being a non-state actor, in finding a lasting peace among the headers rock farmers crisis, we have noticed this dimension that has come to make peace to almost become elusive. So I felt there is a need for the attention of Procmura to also be extended, to the header stroke farmers crisis as it is happening in Nigeria because of the religious dimension the thing has taken. And what brought about that is the encroachment of Boko Haram elements into the camp of those bandits. So they have a mixture of Boko Haram element amongst them. So that has made it to graduated from just being a tussle about land or farm or cattle to a full violation of religion as well as conscience. Thank you.
Oh, wow. That's great, Dr. Dambok. And it's good you're speaking about that and making that plea while we have the Forb Continental Coordinator here in the panel, Dr. Yakubu. And I hope you're following the conversation. And actually, I want to bring you in on that. Listening to Dr. Dambok, he mentioned something to do with coercion as one of the religious activities affecting Forb and other human rights in Nigeria. I want to allow me to engage you on the continental level because you're the continental coordinator for Forb. What are some of these other religious activities that are affecting the freedom of religion or belief on other human rights across the continent, not just in Nigeria? Dr. Yakubu.
Yes. I think also secularism, especially Western secularism, is spreading quite wide across the world, and with social media and internet becoming the conduit, it's coming through many sources of influence. So you find a lot of times those who embrace the Western concept of secularism also encounter difficulties and resistance in their own context here in Africa, because generally most of our societies are conservative. And so when this Western secularism, I'm calling it Western secularism because um, it's basically what many young people will refer to as modern, or something that is trendy. Um, Unfortunately, the society or the communities from which these young people belong to, uh, they are not yet there, and therefore they are conservative and they are opposed to some of these so-called Western influences that they see. This may be in form of dressing. In some communities, they are you find that women in particular, I think we must bring the gender dimension of Forb, where women's dressing is restricted in many communities. In Africa, women are told what to wear. There are, of course, religious codes of dressing codes, which are embraced by those people who belong to that religion. For example, among Muslim, you'll find that the wearing of the veil is very common and is considered to be um, something of pride for the Muslim woman to put on. Um, Nevertheless, in some societies, you will see that where a person is dressed, a lady is dressed, and parts of her body seem to be exposed, she may experience some hostilities from the community. And this is even extended to institutional settings. There are universities that even put on their gates, like indecent dressing is not tolerated. There are professors who will walk out their students because they believe they did not dress decently. So there is also a very broad line between, um, freedom of religion, I can say, is like a two-edged sword. On one hand, um, there is a need to protect it. On the other hand, it can also be taken too far. So I think the interpretational dimensions of some of the expectation or expected behavior that certain religions said is where the problem lies. For example, a statement can be made, someone can make a statement. If they are not educated, that is why I believe folk culture is very important, where you understand the cultural and religious sensitivities so that you don't offend people that belong to a particular religion. So, but there are people who are not educated in that area, and therefore they might make some careless statements, and this careless statement can offend adherents of a particular religion. And also, if the people do not understand that there are legal provisions for how to redress when you feel that your right has been violated or someone has attacked your religion, there are judicial processes that are supposed to be followed. They take the laws into their hand and unleash mayhem on the victim, or sorry, in this case, on the person they think has offended their religion. And this can sometimes even lead to breakdown of law and order. So we have seen this time and again across Africa. And when it comes to examples of this kind of scenarios, I think Nigeria offers a case study where we have recently a young girl in a college of education in Sokoto who made a statement. I'm talking about Deborah Yakubu. I'm not related to
Mhm.
her. It's coincidence. But she made a statement that was considered offensive and considered blasphemous by some Muslim clerics and some of the students in her college. And basically, they pursued her on the street lawlessly and stoned her to death. And this has generated a big problem for us in this country. And thanks to the understanding of many Muslim and Christian leaders stood up together to condemn this act and said, if you can think that there is a violation, the best thing to do is to follow the judicial processes, to follow the law. Many Muslim clerics spoke out, called out those who carried out this dastardly act of murdering the young girl Deborah in a broad daylight. And this is again underscoring the fact that um, ensuring that folk culture thrives is a collective responsibility of all people, especially leaders of religions, of all religions must work together. It's not about us or them, us versus them, but we must join hands to work together. So there are many examples. You go to South Africa, for example, um, you see even in Ghana, for example, where adherents of African variety of African traditional religions are also given their rights. In South Africa, it's enshrined in the law where traditional African religion is respected. In fact, there has been even a case that went to the South African court, High Court, where that someone had to take a leave, for example, to enjoy holiday for traditional religion, and it was he couldn't be sacked by his employer, so that they also deserve to have been given such a right. There are instances where you find in Ghana that the road will bypass a shrine. It will not go through or over the shrine. It will bypass it. And it costs nothing that the state has found a way to accommodate everyone to create that sense of belonging. So I'll go back to what Dr. Dabov said, that freedom of religion is actually human rights. And what we see is that when you grant freedom of religion or belief to everyone, the society stands to benefit. The society will benefit from the unity, from the social cohesion, and the sense of inclusiveness that you have created. And that will also what? Correlate with level of human development. Forb has a correlation with human development because it impacts on other sectors, on the economy, on education. It impacts on every aspect of our life. So there is so much to gain when we ensure that folk culture thrives in our society. And lastly, let me also say that sometimes we take it for granted, but the religious majority may enjoy certain privileges to the exclusion of religious minorities. This is being played out. They patronize the government, or the government politicians patronize them. And so those who belong to small religions, for example, even you have small churches, you have also small religious Muslim sects, small sects that are not recognized by the state and they don't enjoy certain privileges. These are also issues to look at, and the majority must speak up. The majority must see that when the rights of the minorities are violated, they have a moral responsibility. So, here again, beyond the laws, beyond the constitutional provision, beyond the legal framework, there is also a moral dimension to ensure that freedom of religion or belief is safeguarded. This is important, especially for the majority religious group. This is important for religious leaders, especially those who are top ranking religious leaders, especially also for those who are institutional actors that have the power and the means to ensure that freedom of religion or belief is protected. They have a moral responsibility, even if the law does not find them wanting. Morally, they can be held accountable if they choose to look the other way instead of taking action, or instead of by omission or commission supporting the violation, directly or indirectly supporting the violation of freedom of religion or belief. They have a moral responsibility and moral accountability. And this is something we also ought to stress, because we cannot guarantee the freedom of religion or belief if we don't all put our hands on the deck to ensure that it is safeguarded in our day-to-day life.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Yakubu. You definitely need another episode because you have a lot to share as far as Forb goes. And you've thrown in something very important. And on this, I want to get Dr. Hamza's comment. You've brought in the gender dimension as far as Forb violations in Nigeria and across the continent is concerned. I want to allow Dr. Hamza to speak to us about that. What is your comment in terms of the gender dimension in terms of Forb violations in Nigeria is concerned? And at the same time, I had asked something earlier. I don't know whether you got me or you lost part of the question, that I wanted to get the emerging issues that are affecting both the youth and the women with regards to Forb violation, because you told us you're working with women and the youth.
Thank you very much. I will take the first question that you raised on the gender dimension. I will say that, just like Dr. Yakubu has said, if we take the mode of dressing, for example,